day friends. In the subject of fundamental of investment, we are talking of approaches to security valuation. In the approaches of security valuation, there are three important approaches: fundamental analysis, technical analysis, and efficient market hypothesis. I started in my previous lecture on fundamental analysis, and in the fundamental analysis, in my previous lecture, I talked about international factors which affects the economy. So there are three ways in which we make fundamental analysis: economic analysis, industry analysis, and company analysis. In this lecture, I will be talking of the economic analysis, and within the economic analysis, basically the focus will be on domestic economic factors. So there are various factors which shows that where the level of economy is, what is the strength of the economy. So I'll be talking on domestic factors, the factors which affect the economic growth of the country. Or put it this way, that what are the factors which shows the economic strength of the economy of a country, right? So in the domestic economy, basically the GDP, gross domestic product. What is the rate of growth of GDP? So GDP is the total value of goods and services produced in an economy. Growth rate in GDP is an important indicator of the overall state of the economy. You must have heard many times we are saying we are among the fastest growing economy of the world. Means our economy is growing on a real basis at 7 to 8%. If our economy is growing at a 7 to 8%, it means every year our GDP is increasing by 7 to 8%. So it is a good growth rate. By any means, it is considered as a good growth rate. So if economy is growing, it's a sign of strong economy. So what is the growth rate of the GDP? It is a very important indicator to judge the economic strength, to judge the economic health of the country, right? So increasing GDP growth rate indicates improving economic conditions. Index of industrial production, another parameter is IIP, normally known as IIP, index of industrial. If the IIP is increasing, it's basically a source of manufacturing activity. This index shows the manufacturing activity in a country. If IIP is increasing, it's a sign that manufacturing sector is doing well, right? The analyst can understand the basic economic and business condition in the economy by seeing the IIP. If IIP is increasing, it's a good sign that manufacturing sector in the economy is increasing. What is the composition of the GDP? That also reflects the economic strength. That suppose, broadly we say there are three sectors. One is agriculture sector, the other is manufacturing sector, and third is service sector. Although in India, the large part of the income these days comes from the service sector. Gone are the days when the major income used to come from agriculture sector. When we became independent, basically the source of income was agriculture. But slowly and gradually, the large part of the income, if you see the composition of the income, as I said, there are three important components of the composition of the GDP: agriculture, manufacturing, and the service sector. Fortunately, I would say that major part of the income is coming from the service sector. Although we are focusing on the manufacturing sector also, that the percentage of the manufacturing sector in the total composition of the GDP should the percentage of the proportion of manufacturing sector should also increase. But still in India, despite only 15%, approximately 15% of the income coming from the agriculture sector, a very large part of the Indian population, say for example 40% approximately, are engaged in agriculture sector. And the demand in an economy increases when the large part of the population increases its demand. Since the 40% of the population is dependent on agriculture and agriculture is dependent on monsoon, so if in a particular year, if the monsoon is not good, right, then it affects the whole agriculture income, it affects the rural demand. And there are many companies which are dependent on the rural demand in the economy. So when we are talking of the economy, we must see the composition of the economic factors, right? When I say composition of the economy means composition of the GDP. I mean, what is the proportion of the agriculture income? What is the proportion of manufacturing income? What is the proportion of service income? I mean, service sector in the total income. So as I said, the large part of India's population is dependent on agriculture sector, right? And agriculture is more dependent on nature. So if in a particular year, if there is a bad monsoon or if there is a very large floods in the country as a whole, right? So certainly the agriculture income will come down, and if the agriculture income will come down, so it is going to affect the major population of the country. And in that case, all those companies, all those manufacturing companies, all those industries which are dependent on rural demand, their demand will be negatively affected, and thereby the profits of the company will be negatively affected. So when we are talking of the domestic factors in the economic factors, it is not only the GDP growth rate, it is not only the absolute amount of the GDP, but what is the composition of the GDP, that is also important. Employment. See, when the COVID pandemic was at its peak, the unemployment rate in the world as a whole, and especially I am talking of India, increased. So if there is a large percentage of unemployment in the country, certainly at that point of time, when the unemployment is increasing or unemployment is high, the demand will be less, because the purchasing power of the people will be less. So what is the employment scenario in the country? That is also very important economic indicators. So a high unemployment rate adversely affects the stock performance. Inflation. If there is a continuous inflation in the country, I mean, at the outset, I will say initial inflation is good for the industry, because when the inflation takes place initially, I mean, the prices are going up, whatever the stock the companies have, the stock prices goes up. I'm talking of inventory. The value of that inventory goes up, and in that scenario, it is a good for the company. It increases the profits of the company in the short run. But if inflation persists, inflation continues, it is not a good sign for the economy. I'm again saying, if the inflation continues for a very long period of time, because inflation erodes the purchasing power of money. So increase in inflation, as you know, there is an inverse relationship between the purchasing power and the price level. When the price level goes up, the purchasing power. What is purchasing power? Value of a rupee, the purchasing worth of a rupee, right? That is called purchasing power. So if inflation takes place, the purchasing power of the money erodes. So increase in inflation rate also adversely affect production demand, and hence the corporate profitability declines in general. Again, I am saying, if there is a continuous inflation. So one of the reasons for low level of investment, because if the demand will be low, obviously the investment level will also be low. Interest rate. In the world as a whole, for the last 2 months, 3 months, the rate of interests are going up. So if the rate of interest goes up, I will say the borrowing cost for the corporates, for the companies, will go up. I mean, this interest rate is also relation with the inflation. When the inflation increases on a continuous basis, at that point of time or in such a scenario, the rate of interest in the market goes up. And if the rate of interest goes up in the market, right, so the borrowing cost for the companies increases. And in such a scenario, is also an indicator that central bank of the countries are following tight monetary policy, right? So tight monetary policy means they are giving loans to the companies at a tough rules, more stringent rules are being framed while giving loan. They are not following liberal monetary policy. They are not giving loans. Banks are not giving loans at a very liberal terms and condition to the corporates. So this scenario is considered to be not a very good scenario for the companies. In such a scenario, the stock prices are negatively affected. So in sum, interest rates are negatively related with the stock performance in an economy. So if interest rate goes up on a continuous basis, the stock performance are negatively affected by it. Infrastructure facilities. Friends, for any country to develop, when I am saying any country to develop, I mean to say the economy, the companies, right? Industry, infrastructure, I mean to say here physical infrastructure is one of the basic thing. And when you talk of the physical infrastructure, not only the roads, the transport, the ports, airports are required, but also the power, cement sector, telecom sector, right? So all these are the part and the parcel of infrastructure facilities. What is the level of infrastructure facilities in a country, right? That also affects the stock prices. If, like in India, if you see the last 5-7 years, the large number of highways have been built in India, right? The road transport system has improved tremendously in India in the last 5-6 years, right? So with the improvement in the infrastructure, in the road transport system, the cost of transportation comes down. It becomes more quicker. I mean, the transporting the goods becomes more easy. So such a scenario is good for the economy, it's good for the industry, it's good for the company. It will have a positive impact on the stock prices, right? So all these foreign institutional investors, they prefer an economy, a country, a company which is operating in an environment where good infrastructure facilities are there. No company can progress if there is a power shortage in the country, right? So power sector, steel sector, transport sector, I mean telecom sector, all these are part and the parcel of the infrastructure facilities. Improved the infrastructure always make positive impact on the stock prices, right? Demographic factors. Friends, demographic factor means the population, the age group, how the population is divided, rural, urban, right? What is the age group of the people? We say, I mean, people are forecasting that in China, I mean, for a very long period of time, maintaining this growth rate will be difficult for China. One of the reasons is because of its demographic factors. The population of China is aging. Aging means more and more old people are there. On the other hand, India is a young country. I mean, average age group of India is, we say, there are very large population which is in the 30s, right, or which are young population. So young population means productive age group, and productive age group means they will contribute to the production, they will contribute to the economic growth of the country. They will not only be consumers, they will also be producers. So if the demographic factors are positive, obviously the economic will have a positive impact in a country if the demographic factors are positive. I mean, India is being considered as a young country, and a very large English speaking population is there. So since still in the world a very large business language is English, so India gets the advantage of this very thing, that we have a large English speaking population. A lot of these, I mean, IT sector has improved over a period of time in India because of a young population, because of a English speaking population. So demographic factors also affects the economy of a country. Budgetary provisions. So what are the budgetary provisions in an economy? It relates to the economic policy of the country, including fiscal and monetary. Fiscal health of an economy is an indicator of how well the government manages its receipts and expenditure, right? So if the fiscal policy, I mean, if there is a large current account deficit, if there is a large fiscal deficit, it is not being considered as a good thing for an economy, right? So you find it difficult, when I am saying you means a country, find it's very difficult to get a money from the foreign investors, from the foreign financial institutions, if there is a large current account deficit, if there is a large fiscal deficit in an economy. So large fiscal deficit, large current account deficit is not being considered as a good scenario of an economy. So what are the budgetary provisions in a country, right? We say India is able to manage its fiscal policy in a very nice manner because we are able to reduce our fiscal gap between income and expenditure. It is always considered as a good sign. So high fiscal deficit is a cause of concern, means it's a negative thing. Besides fiscal deficit, monetary policy has also an impact. Monetary policy means policy related to the money supply in an economy. So what are the budgetary provisions that also affects the economy? External factors. So when we are talking of the economic analysis, in the economic analysis there are various external factors, sectors also or you can say factors also which is being reflected in the economy of the country, like balance of payment, forex reserve. We proudly say that we have a very large foreign reserves at present. Means, supposing we make large imports, our country is in a position to pay these large imports. Crude prices are going up in the world. If the crude prices are going up, there is a large amount of foreign outflow that will take place, right? The foreign currency outflow that will take place. But if we have a large reserve, because of some reason, because of some adverse situation, if we have to increase our imports, we will be in a comfortable position to pay for these imports. So what is the balance of payment position? Means the balance of payment means the difference between import and exports, not only of physical goods and services, but also includes services. So the balance of payment position, the forex reserve position, that also affects the economic health of a country. So foreign trade or external sector is an important factor which helps to understand the balance of payment account situation in country. Means our balance of payment is healthy. It means there is not a very large gap between our import and export of goods and services. These transactions are further classified into current account and capital account. Means when you are talking of the balance of payment, we divide the balance of payment in two accounts, the current account and the capital account. So a widening current account deficit creates a pressure on exchange rate, means then your country's currency will depreciate and leads to deterioration economic condition, right? So there should not be a very large gap between the current account and deficit account, or current account and deficit is not being considered as a good thing, right? So there should not be a very large gap in the balance of payment situation of any country. So on the base of that, we make economic, all these factors which we have discussed so far, that is the global economy which affects the economy, whether it is exchange rate, whether it is the credit rating of a country, right? Whether it is a forex reserve, it is a domestic factor, increase in the GDP or the rate of growth of the GDP, the composition of the GDP and the employment level in the country. All these countries, monetary policy of the country, fiscal policy of the country, all these economic factors, on the base of all these economic factors, in the stock market, people do make economic forecasting. What is economic forecasting? On the base of various factors, you forecast about the future of the country. Future of the country means future of economic health of the country. So to estimate stock prices changes, and analyst must look at the macroeconomic environment and factors picturing the industry, peculiar to the industry, right? So these various factors which we have discussed in current lecture and even the previous lecture on the fundamental analysis, on the base of these various factors which I have just talked about, like basically the GDP, the composition of the GDP, monetary policy, fiscal policy, exchange rate, right, and credit rating of the country, all these various factors, on the base of these various factors, the industry and the company analysis is being done. And on the base of these various factors, the economic forecasting of the future of the country, of the economy is being done. So economic activity affects corporate profits, investment attitudes and share prices. If economy is booming in a nutshell, obviously we are presuming that industry will do well and the company's profit will increase, the investment environment will improve, more and more investment will take place in the country, and more investment means investment in the industry, investment in the company. What makes the industry? It is the companies which makes an industry. What is the industry basically? The industry is the group of companies engaged in the same business, right? So if I'm talking of a steel industry means all the businesses, all the companies which are engaged in the steel business, that makes the steel industry, right? If I say sugar industry, what does it mean? That all companies which are engaged in the manufacturing of sugar, right? So this industry will have a positive impact if the economy is growing. So economic health affects the industry and industry's health affects the companies. So economic activities affects corporate profits, investment attitude and share prices. For economic analysis, an analyst should be familiar with forecasting techniques. So different forecasting techniques which we use, right? These should be familiar to the stock analyst, it should be familiar to the fundamental analyst. After talking of the economic analysis, then we come to the industry analysis. I have just said what is industry. Group of companies engaged in the same business. So industry is a group of firms that have a similar technological structure of production and produces similar goods and services. If I say textile industry means all the different companies which are engaged in the manufacturing of textile in the country. They use a particular type of technology, and there are different companies which are engaged in the textile business. So there are companies which are small companies, there are companies which are large companies. So all these companies called the textile industry, which are engaged in the manufacturing and the business of the textile. So an analyst, for analyzing the performance and prospects of a problem of an industry, is known as industry analysis. Different industry have different peculiarities, different features. Like, just to give you an example, there are certain industries which are called cyclical industry. Like, for example, many of the commodity industry, like say sugar industry. Sugar industry is considered as a cyclical industry because sugar prices in a country is being affected by the international sugar prices, right? Sometimes the sugar prices are high, sometimes sugar prices are low, and the company's performance is being affected by the sugar industry as a whole. If the industry is doing well, it means the sugar prices international market is going up. So all those companies, the industry as a whole, do well. When I'm saying industry as a whole, there may be companies which may not be doing so well. There may be companies which are doing exceptionally well. But if the industry as a whole is booming, it will have a positive impact on the company, right? So depending on the nature of industry, we say in India, IT industry has a pricing power. When I say IT industry has a pricing power, means all those companies which are engaged in the information technology business. Like, if I name a few, like companies like TCS, Tata Consultancy Services, Infosys, SCL, Wipro, these companies are the major companies of the IT sector, and their major business is export, right? So, and they command good price of their services which they are providing. So all these IT services enjoys a better profit margin because they have the international demand and their demand level is high. They are able to fetch good price in the market. So the profit level of the industry as a whole is high, general profit level. On the other hand, if you talk of the textile industry in India, right? So textile industry in India is a very competitive industry. There is a very stiff competition within the industry. So the profit margin in the textile industry is comparatively less as compared to the IT companies. I'm not saying within the textile there are companies which are doing which are doing better than many other companies in the textile business. But if you analyze the industry as a whole, if you compare the industry, I'll say the pricing power. Pricing power means the price of its end product that is being fetched in the market. In the IT sector is more as compared to the textile sector. There are certain industries which are of commodity, like say for example commodity industry, the steel industry, the cement industry, right? Their prices are also being affected by the international market. Sometimes the steel prices in the international market goes up, then all the companies which are engaged in the steel business means the steel industry as a whole, do well. But if the international prices of the steel companies goes down, all the companies in the steel business are being negatively impacted. So depending on the nature of industry, company's performance is being affected. So industry analysis is required because the return and risk of various industries are different. Different industries have different level of risk and different level of returns. So industry life cycle helps to identify the industry in startup stage, growth stage, maturity stage and declining stage, right? So at what level of the growth or what level of the life cycle industry is passing through That is also important to study. So startup stage means like the industry is new. I mean they are producing something new product, something technology is new, the product is new, right? So in such a scenario, the growth rate of the industry, the chances of growth is high. So the startup stage is characterized by the introduction of new product, technology, relatively low profit because you are introducing the products in the market. So at that time, your sales level may not be very high. Like any product has a life cycle. Similarly, industry has also a life cycle. So when it is at the startup stage, the profit margin is low, uncertain demand, rapid and increasing growth due to growing demand of the product. So the return potential is high, accompanied with high risk. Means the potential. I am not saying the profit is high at this stage, but the potential of high profit is high because the chances of growth is also high. But so is the level of risk. Similarly, then comes the growth stage. After the startup stage, as like in the case of the product cycle of a particular product, similarly the industry. Growth stage means where the demand of the industry is increasing at a very high rate. So when the demand increases at a high rate, it means the company will make higher profits, promising higher returns to the investors. So at the end of the growth stage, the product is commonly used and growth rate starts to decline though positive. So like OTT platform, especially when COVID came to the world, right? So these many, especially if I talk in terms of India, many OTT platforms were being developed. People were sticking at home. So many OTT platforms people start using. People could not go to the outside. They could not go to the cinema halls. So many OTT platforms developed in India, and the industry as a whole becomes growth. Then maturity stage. When the rate of growth of the industry starts declining, that is called the maturity stage. So in such a scenario, when the industry reaches the maturity stage, the profit level doesn't increase. So when the profit level doesn't increase, the rate of growth of the profit starts declining. In such a scenario, the stock price will be not very high. Means that the stock price will reflect the stage of the industry. And finally, declining growth stage. Means when the industry as a whole, there is a stiff competition in the industry, the pricing power is not being enjoyed by the industry. So in such a scenario, the profit starts coming down and the stock price is being reflected in, right? So different industry, when we make up the industry analysis, we talk of the nature and type of industry, what is the level of growth, what is at what stage of the life cycle the industry is, I mean whether the industry as a whole is having the pricing power or not. So these are the various cyclical industry, defensive industries, right? So I've already talked about this cyclical and defensive industry like FMCG, fast moving consumer goods. They are called defensive industry. There is a stiff competition among the companies. All these companies like Colgate, Hindustan Lever, Dabur, Patanjali, all these different type of companies, they are in the fast moving consumer goods. Their product have a close competition amongst all these companies. So they cannot charge very high price of their product. So because of that, the profit will also be not very high, right? So depending on the industry which you are the cyclical growth industry. So these are the various types of industries, and the product of the industry, what product you are producing in the industry, these are all. What it means is, to sum up, that two factors we analyzed in this lecture and the previous lecture, that while talking of the fundamental analysis, in the fundamental analysis there are three important things: economic analysis, industry analysis, and company analysis. Company analysis I have not made so far, right? We have talked about in this lecture the economic analysis, and the previous lecture economic analysis and the industry analysis. If a particular company is in an industry which is booming, the stock price, there is a likelihood that stock price will be high. If the industry is in a industry which is of high cyclical nature, and the life cycle of the industry is that it is declining, there is a great likelihood that stock price of that company will also not be very high, right? So this is what we mean by industry analysis and the economic analysis. Thank you very much.